Good morning, everyone. We'll call the Juvenile Justice Board, Circuit 13, to order. If you will please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I'll ask our secretary to call roll of the board members.
Good morning. Please respond when you hear your name. Travis Coy.
Present.
Mr. Brancato.
Present.
Gina Justice.
Present.
Ms. Beth Pasick.
She was excused.
Okay, thank you. Captain Myra Rivera.
Present.
Lieutenant Matthew Kamat. Honorable Donna Cameron Cepeda. Ms. Chrissy Dorion.
Present.
Ms. Conchita Canty-Jones.
Present.
Laura Byrne.
Present.
Lyra.
Present.
Tina.
Present.
Reverend Dr. Glenn Dames. Ms. Sarah Grimmett. Markesh Thomas.
Present.
Ms. Latrice Rowell.
Present.
Pam Jeffrey.
Present.
Kimberly Williams. Mr. Rob Parkinson.
Present.
That's it.
Thank you. Well, welcome, everyone. We'll start with some introductions, and I'll start by noting that today is a special meeting. We are joined by our Secretary of Juvenile Justice, Dr. Eric Hall. We thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And we'll start with Dr. Hall giving an introduction, and we'll go around. And you can just say your name and
Didn't know if you wanted a bio or just my name. But again,
Whatever you want.
Eric Hall, Secretary at the Department of Juvenile Justice, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. But it's great to be here with you, and thank you for the invitation to attend and to join the community in this conversation and the work that you're doing. So thank you.
go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm Commissioner Donna Cameron Cepeda, and I'm blessed to be here. Newly elected, so excited, happy for all you're doing. I know you're all doing amazing things, and I'm so excited for this board. Thank you.
Chrissy?
Chrissy Dorion, Hillsborough County Schools, the Juvenile Justice Transition Department.
Kelly Hammersley, Department of Juvenile Justice, Chief Probation Officer, Circuit 13.
Ryan Egg, Department of Juvenile Justice, Assistant Chief, Circuit 13.
Good morning. I'm Gina Justice. I'm the Court Administrator for the 13th Judicial Circuit.
Good morning, Captain Myra Rivera with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
Good morning, Matthew Comet, Lieutenant with the Tampa Police Department.
Good morning, Sarah Grimmig with Hillsborough County CINS programs.
Good morning, Judy Royston with Juvenile Diversion Program, Administrative Office of the Courts.
Good morning, Patrick Lindsay, Hillsborough County Children's Services.
Good morning, Heather Casola, Hillsborough County Children's Services.
Good morning, Angel Colon, Department of Juvenile Services and Defense. I'm the chairperson, Stopping Committee in Hillsborough County.
Good morning, Jason Grace, Superintendent, Hillsborough Juvenile Detention Center.
Christina Austin, Children's Court. Sabby Lee, Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, Office of Prevention and Juvenile Services.
Alice Sims, Assistant Secretary in Probation Services with the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. Glad to be here.
Laura Byrne, Editor and Owner of Tampa Bay Parenting Magazine.
Hey, Pam Jeffrey, Executive Director of Success for Kids and Families.
Shade Washington, Hillsborough County School Board, Vice Chair.
Travis Coy, Juvenile Division Chief, Office of the State Attorney.
Larry Meslinik, Deputy Chief of the State Attorney's Office.
Latrice Rowell, I'm the Director of Hope Street for One More Child.
Tina, I'm with Pay Center for Girls.
Lyra with Bay Center for Girls.
Good morning, everyone. Davia Larabor, Executive Director at PACE Center for Girls and Secretary for this board.
Hi, good morning. Conchita Canty-Jones of Career Source Tampa Bay, Director of Student Engagement.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Marquez Thomas.
And I'm Rocky Brancato. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the Public Defender's Office, and I'm the Chair of the Juvenile Justice Board. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to number 3, acceptance of the November minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And does anyone have a motion?
Rocky, I reviewed them. I found them substantively correct. I move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion by Mr. Parkinson to accept and seconded by Ms. Dorion. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They'll be accepted. Okay, we'll move on to the chairperson's report. First of all, I do need to ask for a little forgiveness here. On the agenda, there was supposed to be under presentations a C, and that would be Dr. Byron Clayton. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief of Sector Partnerships at Career Source Tampa Bay, giving a presentation. If there is no objection, that was my error. We're going to have him give a presentation today as well. Okay, hearing no objections, we will do that. My main update for the board right now is we're very excited that we now have a full board of all statutory members. And the two that just crowned our board are here before us. We have Lyra and Tina from the PACE Center for Girls. And they are fulfilling the role of the juvenile member of the board. So we very much appreciate it. I served on the board for 6 years and actually traveled to Tallahassee with the girls every year to help advocate for PACE. And there's one thing I know about PACE girls. It's when they have something to say, they will enrich us with what they have to say and advocate for their position. So they're going to bring a very important perspective to this board. And for as long as I've been on the board or attended the board meetings, we've never had the youth member. So you all are very important. I want to thank you. I also want to thank Ms. Larabor, the Executive Director of PACE, for helping us fulfill that role. We'll move on to member updates. Department of Juvenile Justice, Ms. Hammersley.
Yes, I would like to provide our current census for youth that are involved with DJJ Circuit 13. Currently, we have 322 youth that are on probation supervision with the department. Likewise, on youth that are on supervised release status, we have 25 youth. Of those 25 youth, 8 are on electronic monitoring as a condition of their supervised release. And we also have another 8 youth that are on electronic monitoring as a condition of their probation sanctions. As far as intake, we have a total of 565 youth that have open intake cases that have yet to be disposed. And the last update I have from the department is we are currently doing recruiting for our 4 JPO vacancies, and we are have the selection process is ongoing as we speak. So hopefully we'll fill that, and we'll continue with our recruitment efforts with all of our stakeholders as well. And that's my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Hammersley. Prevention, Ms. McGee. Good morning.
Let's say it again, now we're on. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just only have a brief announcement that I just wanted to kind of let everyone know. As you know, we always do our GAPs, Gaining Appreciation by Adjusting Perspectives, which is a platform that we use in bringing law enforcement officers together and our youth together to have a conversation about what the role of the officers are, and then also finding out what our kids are thinking about. And I'm privileged to be able to say that we will be doing our GAP over at Hillsborough PACE for Girls. And it's February the 22nd. It's at 10 a.m. I hope that you, if you will allow in your schedule to kind of come out and see this amazing conversation, we would love to have you. We also have what we call our Impact Experience, and it's for entrepreneurs or professional non-professionals that come out to programs and actually talk to our kids about their careers. Because we want our kids to be successful, we want our kids to thrive. And the only way for us to be able to do that is to provide, mentors like entrepreneurs to come in and talk to our kids and share the information that they have. I have provided handouts on the table, so please take them when you leave. And by all means, if you are interested in a gap or an impact of experience, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGee. Detention, Major Grice.
Good morning.
And you'll need to step up to the microphone as well.
You want me to?
Yeah, yes. Because this is being captured at home on television, so they won't be able to
Understood.
hear you otherwise.
Yes, sir. Good morning, guys. Currently, we have 55 youth in our custody at the detention center, 49 of which are males and 6 females. We have three youth currently waiting on placement that are in commitment waiting. 2 of those have been with us beyond 30 days. Other than that, it's business as usual. I also like to say I do sincerely appreciate the communication and the relationships that I have with our stakeholders and providers. Anytime I pick up the phone in need of a question or answer to a question or just some guidance, the response time and the professionalism on the other end is just paramount. So I do appreciate your relationships that we have established, and thank you.
Thank you, Major Grice, and we appreciate everything you've done over there at the detention center for the kids. Civil Citations, Ms. Grimmick. I'm sorry,
I'm okay
Ms. Royston,
here?
yeah, Ms. Royston.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. For civil citations for the month of December 2022, there were 32 clients referred, 20 from the community, 13 from schools. The dominant charges were battery and petty theft. As far as December of 2021, last year, there were 45 clients referred, 28 from the community and 17 from the schools. The dominant charges being battery, domestic violence, and battery. And of these clients referred, 21 were female and 24 were male. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Royston. And CINS, Ms. Grimmick.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to tell you who we're currently serving. Right now in shelter, we have 1 truancy court-ordered youth, 1 CINS youth, 3 domestic violence youth, 1 domestic violence civil citation youth, 3 emergency shelter placement, and we currently have 15 kids on intensive case management. I'm going to speak to you a little bit later about some of the other things we have going on. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Okay. Now we will invite our Secretary Hall to talk to us about what's going on with the department, initiatives, that type of stuff, and you have as much time as you want. You can either do it from here, or you can do it from up there. I think the computer's up there for the PowerPoint.
Sir.
And this will be the PowerPoint for the Department of Juvenile Justice.
Pathway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. And, I'll start by just telling you a little bit about myself. And I have to tell you, I feel like I'm home. I'm a 3-time grad of University of South Florida. And I can tell you, even early on, started my career in juvenile justice right around the corner here at what back then was called the Tampa Marine Institute. I was teaching nights and weekends, GED, and doing case management, actually while finishing up my bachelor's. And again, to come back, see this community and the work that's taking place in support of our young people, it's just great to see, again, the members of the community and the leaders of this community coming together to support our young people and doing the work that we do. So it's good to be back home, and look forward to telling you a little bit about the department. So, since that time, going to University of South Florida and kind of cutting my teeth here, in juvenile justice, my journey kind of took me down the path of working as not only a local executive director with local programs, working on a state level, and then working on a national level with a nonprofit organization, really focused on helping support and redirect our young people, really being on a path to long-term success. That put me into a path where I went to North Carolina for 6 years, where most recently served as the Deputy State Superintendent for Education in North Carolina, and then was asked to come back home in 2019 by Commissioner Corcoran and come serve as the state's first chancellor for not only innovation, but also the senior chancellor at Department of Ed, where my portfolio included our Office of Early Learning, our K-12 public schools, our state colleges, Office of Safe Schools, vocational rehab, Division of Blind Services, and a couple other areas at the department. But doing that work for 3 years and looking at the work that we continue to do in support of education, I tell everybody, our best strategy for public safety is a high-quality education for all kids. That is the best strategy we can have. If we support our kids up front early on and put them on a path to academic success, give them a path and a vision to have post-secondary opportunities and get a credential or a degree that gives them opportunities long-term for them and their families, that's how we change the trajectory. And whether it's a young person that hasn't come in contact with our system or whether it is a person in our system, those are the pathways that we have to pursue and make sure we create those opportunities. And it's something I'm personally passionate about it. So you'll hear me talk a lot today about the power and the importance of education and how that, again, opens up opportunities for our young people. Part of that bias comes from the fact that, I also started as a teacher. And so when I was doing that work, going to USF, I studied for being a biology teacher. So I worked nights and weekends, like I said, Juvenile Justice, my first job, and doing my work as a teacher at Chamberlain High School right here in town. And so again, being able to be here today and stand before you, it's both an honor, a privilege, and it's a humbling experience to be appointed by the governor to serve in this role and come full circle in my career, and to be able to lead, support, and serve an entire agency and network of partners that are committed to doing this work. So with that, let me kind of jump right in. I was appointed back in November of, I guess technically not 2022, 2021, but started December. So I just finished up really about 1 year anniversary. And I can tell you my first 6 months on the job, for me, it was a priority to look at our data, our trends, because having been away from the juvenile justice work for about a decade, it was amazing to see where we've come during that time. To look at, programs and opportunities like civil citation, things that we're doing to redirect people early on so they don't have to have a pathway deeper into our system. Being able to look at, outcomes around arrests and some of the data that I'll share here in just a minute. But for me, what was really telling was to come back and kind of see where we're at today with our programs and our providers, and really, kind of this pivot from, having over 10,000 kids a year committed to our, residential programs to about 2,000 kids a year in residential programs, and instead have some of the numbers that we're hearing about the number of kids that are being redirected through civil citation. Those are the things that are powerful. But looking at that data, unpacking that data, and looking at that during those first 6 months, I was also out on the road going to all 21 of our juvenile detention centers, going to all 39 of our residential programs across the state, going to every judicial circuit and talking with our stakeholders and partners, engaging with our law enforcement partners, our state attorneys, our public defenders, our courts, with our team out in the local circuits. To me, it was being able to balance what the data was telling me on paper about our numbers, but also being able to hear the stories and the narratives about what it took to get us here and where do we need to go next. And that, over this past year, for me, was really about coming together and putting together a strategy and a plan so that we can build on that success. Because, I used to have a coach that would tell me, he said, today's great is tomorrow's good. Meaning that you can be great today and you can be the best and you can be on top of your game, but if you don't stay on top of it, somebody's going to surpass you. And we've been national leaders in this work. So we can either step back and be complacent, which is not my plan. We're going to push to the next level because it took a lot of work to get us to where we're at today. But it's kind of like when you try to lose weight. It's like those last 5 to 10 pounds are the hardest ones to get off. This next part of our journey is going to be pretty intense, and it's going to be tough. But the fact is it's worth it because we've got young people that are depending on us to get it right, and we've got communities that are depending on us to make sure that we're creating stronger, safer communities for our community, for our public. And again, my commitment to this board and to the boards across the state and to the citizens is that we're going to do that work and we're going to do it well, but we're going to do it hand in hand with each of you to make sure that we're doing what's best. So let me jump into our pathway to impact, and I do apologize. Okay, good, so you can see the PowerPoint. As I mentioned earlier, Florida's the largest, most comprehensive system in the country. And it's not because of the number of kids that we have in our detention centers or because of the number of kids in our residential programs. It's because we have the full continuum of support with prevention up into the deep end of our system with our max risk facilities. To me, that is a game changer because what it means is that we're not just focused on kids once they come to court and go deeper into our system. We're saying we're looking at how do we deploy services like our Assistant Secretary, Ms. Sims, and her team are doing in partnership with programs like CINS and opportunities to do things with our PACE Center for Girls. Give kids that upfront opportunity so they don't come into our system. That to me is, again, a strength of our agency, and you can see that we've had significant shifts, and we're going to continue to prioritize prevention. But I would tell you, like I said earlier, one of our best prevention strategies is ensuring success of our kids in school. And I want to talk more about that as well. Our mission statement, we have done a little bit of an update to our mission statement. You'll see it here. The prior version talked about troubled youth. I'm all about using language that is very positive and affirmational when we talk about the individuals that we serve. So we're going to be focused on youth and families. And it's about how do we make sure that we're doing that in a coordinated way with world-class team members to do the work that we have to do. The team is going to be the game changer if we're going to make sure that we move to this next level. There's no doubt that when you look across all systems, all industries, workforce has been a challenge in many areas. But for us, we have to make sure that if we're going to deliver great outcomes, I got to have the best team members possible, not only working with the department, but for the networks of providers that are doing the work with us. And you'll see where that makes its way into our strategic plan going forward. But with that, our two objectives, again, let's keep kids out of the system, use the interventions, the prevention programs that we have to do that. But for kids that come in contact with our system, let's focus on actually reducing recidivism. And while we have great numbers and trends that we've been moving towards, again, we've got some more work to do, and I'll, again, unpack that for us more as we go through. Let's talk about juvenile arrests. I go back again 10, 20 years ago when we had over 150,000 kids a year being arrested here in the state of Florida, where most recently we're almost right at the point of 37,000 kids last year. So if you think about that drop and you think about that big dip, that to me is extremely impressive. And I would tell you what's really driving a lot of that is, of course, the work that we're doing on the front end with our law enforcement partners, our state attorneys, public defenders, and being able to use programs like civil citation to help reduce the number of kids coming deeper into our system. When we talk about the 10,000 kids at one point in time that were committed to our residential programs, we had many kids that were being committed to residential based on misdemeanor offenses. What we're saying is that we're redeploying resources to the front end, doubling down on those issues and those challenges that our young people might, make those mistakes, but not let that, one worst day of their life define them for the rest of their life. And so how do we redirect them quickly with immediate, what I call accountability? Because when you give a young person who has that misdemeanor offense a civil citation, now they've got automatic accountability for what they just did. You're giving them a citation, and what we know is that 82% of the kids that are completing a civil citation program, well, one, we have 82% of the kids that are in it completing it, and of those 82%, only 3% are recidivating. So it shows that it's working. It means that we've got a majority of the kids that are coming through, the 11,000 kids in 21-22, we're seeing a majority of those kids, over 9,000 kids, that have that initial brush with law enforcement. They have immediate accountability through that citation to complete community service hours and other things that may be assigned. But once they're done, they're not looking back, they're looking forward and hopefully getting that access to continue their education and get across the finish line with a diploma. So to me, again, I go back to data. The data says that it's working. And something else to keep in mind is that we know sometimes that if a youth doesn't have a civil citation, right now we're at about 69% of the eligible youth in our state are able to receive a civil citation. So 69%, while that's come a long way over the last few years, we want to continue to see where that's an option in many of our circuits around the state. But I talk about immediate accountability because here's what we know is that sometimes when a youth is not given a civil citation for that misdemeanor offense, by the time it gets disposed of, oftentimes those cases are closed with no accountability whatsoever, and there's nothing. And what we know with kids, I don't know about anybody else, but I have 2 kids at home. If I wait and tell my kid that they've lost their phone for something they did last week, they don't remember what they did last week. But if I say you lose your phone right now because you didn't do your chores, you'll see, and I know it's probably kind of hard to see probably from where you are, but when we talk about our residential commitment programs, going from where we were at 48% to we're 38%, we're at the lowest that we've ever had in our recidivism so far in our residential programs. Positive trends. When we look at where we've gone with probation, going from 19% down to 12% recidivism for kids that are served on probation, the 3% for our prevention and our CINS programs and things of that nature. The recidivism numbers, again, are all at an all-time low. Now, we got to continue to monitor because it's going to be tough to keep those there. But again, if we're going to even go to the next step of lowering those numbers, it's going to take some intensive work. I know most of you know the main program areas of our department, but I will cover them briefly. I've talked about prevention. 2021, we served nearly 26,000 youth through our prevention programs here in the state. That includes our CINS shelters, behavioral interventions, that kind of encompasses like our PACE programs, the AMI Kids prevention programs that we have as well. And then mentoring and tutoring. Again, you talk about something very different compared to most states, is having opportunities in juvenile justice system to have partners like Boys and Girls Clubs and others that are reaching into our communities to provide that kind of support. You don't find those types of relationships oftentimes in juvenile justice systems. To me, that is something that defines us, not only as the national leaders in that space, but it reinforces our commitment to a full continuum of resources and supports. Detention services, I want to thank Major Grice because I had a chance to go there yesterday even, and I have to say, it was great to meet the young men and women in your facility, and I've gone there quite a few times, and he will tell you, I always come unannounced, and sometimes I pop in on a weekend if I happen to be in the Tampa Bay area. But to me, that's going out and seeing, the work that's taking place. When we talk about detention, we have 21 facilities across the state, approximately 1 per judicial circuit. The youth that are served, just to kind of give you some numbers, in 2021, we had about 8,400 youth that were served in secure detention during the course of that year. We had about 4,300 that were on supervised release here in the state, and about 2,800 on electronic monitoring here in the state. So just to kind of give you some ideas about the numbers, but I want to make sure I'm clear that 8,400, that reflects potentially that one youth that comes in and is there for one night till they go to court the next morning. So it doesn't mean that on any given day, as a matter of fact, even as of this morning, we're less than 700 kids across the state in our 21 detention centers. Now, to give you context, when I was working in Miami-Dade, over a decade ago, well, probably almost 2 decades ago now, sorry, I can tell you that on any given day, it was not uncommon to see 250 to 300 kids in that detention center alone. So when you talk about detention populations going down, again, these are all trends that, again, I think help to tell the story about the success that we're having here in Florida. Probation and community intervention. This is an opportunity, and I know when I hear our probation numbers, I can tell you it's amazing to hear, what our caseloads look like today. Going back to numbers years ago, when you would have caseloads for a probation officer, well over 100, sometimes 150 kids on a caseload. Now we see caseloads sometimes between 30 and 50. What that means is that while caseloads have gone down, we also have an opportunity in a very, what I would say a significant opportunity to go deeper and intentional work in supporting our youth and families. So instead of having our attention spread across 150 cases, we can say, no, let's look at the individual youth that we're serving and what are the interventions and supports that we can provide them while on probation that, yes, helps them to complete their court-ordered requirements, but also helps to address any other community resources we can connect them to address those other risk factors that may include education, may include mental health, other behavioral services that we can put in place for them, and in some cases, even for their families. I was glad to hear that I think we got Career Source at the board, on the board here today. Those are opportunities when you talk about strengthening not just the opportunity for a youth, but for a family. Those are things we got to continue to do as we work with youth and families. How do we connect families to credentialing opportunities? Again, if you're going to look at long-term self-sufficiency, it all comes down to how do we build workforce opportunities for the youth and families that we're serving. And so I look forward to having more conversations around that. I also sit on the Career Source board for Florida, and I take that as a significant responsibility to our communities and how we create, again, upward mobility through career planning and credentialing. Because the fact is, if all of us have workforce challenges and we need people to come in, let's build that capacity and change dreams and opportunities for the people that we serve. Residential, like I said, we have 39 residential facilities across the state. I will tell you we're down to about 37 right now because I have 2 that I closed recently and they will reopen, but those programs are going through some redesign and we will have them back up and running here pretty soon. But overall, you can see the numbers. In 2021, we had 2,481 youth that were committed and about 1,500 residential beds here in the state. And commitment numbers continue even based on what we've seen in 21, 22. We're seeing around 1,900 to 2,000 kids, during the course of that year. So let me talk about Pathway to Impact. I am very big on building organizational culture and making sure that we build a team that is unlike any other. I'm all about relationships. I'm about, accountability at the same time because I think, when you have, strong teams, they're going to be built on those 2 premises, right? You've got great people that are committed to the mission, but they also understand that we have to drive deep and meaningful outcomes and impact for those that we serve. So we really spent some time, like I said, over the past year saying, what is the organization and agency that we choose to be in this next phase of our development? So these 5 guiding principles came from a series of conversations, feedback, talking to our stakeholders, but it's also about what do we know is evident in building a strong culture. And these would be the guiding principles for our agency, our team, and the work that we do with our network of providers. So this first one is dedication to the success of youth and families. We have to be committed to that, and it talks, in here about customer service. I always ask people, and you don't have to name names, but think about a fast food restaurant that you might go to and one that you always go to because it has great customer service. You probably come to expect that it's clean. You come to expect that the quality of food is probably at a level that you've come to appreciate. And sometimes you might even get something like it's my pleasure or something at the end that makes you feel like you're really appreciated as a customer. We need to have that same level of customer service for the youth and families that we serve. And so we're expecting that, and we're going to make sure that everything that we do is done with dignity and respect at every encounter for everyone that we're serving and really supporting. That's important. Treat people the way you want to be treated. It's the old golden rule. My mom drove that into my head, and even to this day, she still reminds me of that. Principle 2, develop a world-class team. You know, we were very fortunate this past year, and I can tell you, coming in on my first day, our Deputy Secretary, Tim Neerman, I asked both him and our Chief of Staff, I said, tell me what's in my blind spot. It's my first day. Things have changed since I've been away from this for a decade. Just kind of tell me what's been going on. And they said, well, Deputy tells me, he says, Secretary, you've got about 500 detention officer vacancies in your detention centers, representing about 41% of our detention workforce. That's why it was important to me to get out there and kind of be on the ground and understand, look eye to eye with my detention officers, my majors, and see, what are the challenges that they're facing. Same thing with our probation officers, where they were down, like 23, 24% vacancy rates across the state. Well, last year we were very fortunate between the governor's budget and the legislature, we were able to increase salaries, and we've seen significant trends improve from that, where we went from 41% vacancy rates in detention to where now we're at about 23, 24%. So a big increase in just 6 months, because you got to think that budget just went into effect July 1st. At the same time, with our probation officers going from 23% vacancy rates down to 13% statewide. Those are all trends, and it makes a difference when you go from, roughly $14 an hour as a detention officer to making $19 an hour, or $17 an hour as a probation officer up to $20 an hour starting. These are things that, again, we're getting people through the door, but I can tell you part of being a world-class team is not just about the dollar. People will come through the door based on the dollar, but they stay based on the commitment and the leadership of those that they serve and support. We have to make sure that, again, going back to that culture, are we creating an environment where people want to be connected and they want to stay because they believe in the mission and they believe in the work that we do? And having that world-class team is important, and we're going to continue to reinforce that as we did in our legislative budget request this year, where we want to look at our network of providers. They got an increase last year to $15 an hour. In our budget for residential and for our CINS providers, we're looking to try to bring them up to the $19 an hour. Because if I'm giving you like a realistic local example, you go to our detention center. On one side of a parking lot, you've got the detention center, and you've got staff now that are making $19 an hour. Imagine the challenge across the street with a residential program where they've got $15 an hour, and you're talking about trying to recruit for staff. And we're talking about the same degree of work, and we got to make sure, and I'm talking about care and custody, we got to make sure that we're trying to level that playing field. So our budget request this year has in there to try to bring that compensation level up to, again, support our providers, because while world-class team, like I said, is not just about employees of DJJ, it's about the providers that we contract with and making sure that we have aligned values that support all people to help them achieve their goals. Principle 3, excellence through leadership. Here, I'll just go ahead and read it to you. Cultivate high-impact leaders regardless of position. I'm not into titles. But that has to have an expectation of excellence and accountability in everything that we do. Because you can talk about excellence, and it sounds great when you throw it up on a billboard or on a PowerPoint, but we have to be accountable for that, and that starts with me. Am I conveying that expectation? Am I reinforcing that expectation? And it's not about how you beat excellence into people. You lead people to excellence. You talk about how do you create the conditions and the motivation for people to want to do what's right because it's the right thing to do, but do it because it's also, we have to have the best environments and the best services and the best conditions for our kids. That's how we get to the root cause of what's driving some of the behaviors in our kids. Take away all the other distractions and you focus on the root cause, that's where you'll start to see great things happen. Data and evidence driven. We have the most robust data system in the nation for a juvenile justice system. Unparalleled, we get those calls all the time and we hear that. But we have to continue to look at, while we have great data, how are we using it to make adjustments and decisions at the state level, but also working with our local communities like the CABs to use that data to drive decision making. We are actually making some significant changes, and one of the things that I might ask Mr. Chair is that maybe potentially the next meeting, our Office of System Innovation, which we launched about 6-7 months ago, that is an office that is specifically dedicated to working with our local boards and our circuits to use local data and understand what are some opportunities for improvement. And so you have a coach that's actually assigned to working with the chief and is here to help support the board and this community to see how can we use data to make adjustments where we need to. And that information comes back up to us to say, okay, are there things that we need to be considering with prevention programs? Are there things we need to consider in supporting probation? What are the opportunities we have to use that data to make informed decisions to improve our systems? Because in the end, if we're not doing that, then we're just reacting. And I'm not into reacting. I'm all about creating a strategy. Let's address it, and let's use the data to have the agility we need to be responsive. And what you'll find is through that Office of System Innovation, we have coaches across each region, and again, they're here to support and work with, not just the board, but specifically work with the chief and her team, and be able to come back and share that local data. And so if that's an opportunity, we would definitely love to see that, Mr. Chair, if that's something we can put on the radar.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. Commitment to results goes back to what I've all been saying throughout, is that if we're not about results, we're not about outcomes, then in the end, why are we here? So you're going to see these 5 values. It's going to be reinforced in all of our training. It's going to be infused in everything that we do, from the onboarding process to how we do additional training for all members of our team, starting with our leadership team and our local leaders doing this work, because again, it's a change in the direction to take us to that next level. And as we talk about that next level, this is where we really get to the root of what we're going to be focused on. It's what we're calling our pathway to impact. It's really our strategic plan for the next 4 to 5 years, and it's built on 4 cornerstones to service excellence. It starts with our impact statement, and I'm not going to read this one to you, but I would tell you, we've been a national leader, but I go back to that comment I said earlier. Today's great is tomorrow's good. We got to continue to raise the bar, and our impact statement is focused on making sure that we do that. But our 4 cornerstones, and again, you're going to see some recurring themes here. Going back to that world-class team and talent. We've recently redesigned, and we are in the process of redoing our detention officer academies and our probation officer academies. Obviously, part of it is built on these 5, guiding principles, but it's also built on recent job task analysis that are being completed so that we can go ahead and look at the training that needs to be redesigned. The other thing that's happened is that in redesigning our staff development, we've realigned that whole division, and now it's called the Office of Talent, Leadership, and Culture. We call it TLC for the sake of just being short, but that office is going to be focused on not only looking at the data and information around what's worked in our training, but we're also looking at how are we supporting our team for having credentials and things that support them for their long term. So, for example, Major Grice may have a new team member that comes into his, into his organization or his program or his detention center, and if that detention officer, let's say they have their high school diploma, which is the minimum requirement for being a detention officer, well, they have to complete our academy anyways. It's 120 hours of training. Well, we've worked with the state colleges where now the 120 hours of training articulates into 6 credit hours into an associate's in science and criminal justice. So now you've got 10% of your associates done with training you already had to do at no cost. And then being able to reinforce, and we've just launched our first cohort. So we have 30 detention officers here in the state that just signed up for that cohort, and that associate's in science degree is something we've never been able to offer before like this. And the state covers 6 credit hours each semester for continuing education. So it's no cost to the individual. We're putting them on a pathway to achieve goals that they may have for themselves. And in some cases, some of them may have never even thought about going to college or doing it, but you've already got 6 credit hours done with training you have to do for us anyways. So that's the kind of innovation we're talking about, is how do we use our network of colleges, our school districts, and others to bring these opportunities forward? Because if we build our team, I guarantee you we will build our kids. And that's what we have to be focused on. I'll jump down to the bottom, the data-informed decision-making. I've kind of highlighted that already a little bit, but what we do is I've launched something that's built on a model that a good friend of mine out of Miami-Dade was doing, and it's called Datacom, where each month I sit down with each assistant secretary, and through the Office of System Innovation, we are looking at data, trends, utilization, things that we need to be thinking about in the areas of prevention, probation, detention, and residential services. That's every month, and I'm talking about with me, my deputy, and our leadership team. We are going through that data and we're looking at it so that we can make informed decisions. So that is something that's a little bit new, because while we look at data on a regular basis, I get daily dashboards of a number of data points that we look at, but looking at it and doing something with it is very different. And so that is what this process is about. Then implementing evidence-based practices. We have a great history. We've done a lot of work in this state around evidence-based programs. But I'll go back to that top one. If you have breakdowns in your staffing patterns, or you have evidence-based interventions or curriculums, and you have the person trained to deliver that curriculum, and they're only there for 3 or 4 weeks, and what's supposed to be a 12-week curriculum, you just had complete breakdown in the continuity of service. So I've got to address the staffing and the team and that continuity, but in order to get to this next level in evidence-based implementation, again, we get the team secure, but the fidelity is going to be critical. And we're going to hold ourselves accountable as an agency along with our partners for making sure that we're doing that, because the data and research, we know what it says. If we do it right, we do it well, recidivism will go down. Then that last one is youth academic achievement and post-secondary success. I can look, because we used to have a lot of work in this area, Chrissy. I can tell you, I think she will tell you, I've always been passionate about education, and we're going to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable for doing that hand in hand with our district partners, as well as with the Department of Education, who is a great partner with us as we're looking to bring forward additional resources and supports in the area of education. But I want to see that for every kid that we have, they can leave our system either on grade level and can go back into high school, where they can easily articulate into their grade level and complete high school or middle school for some of our younger kids. But at the same time, kids that have the ability to get their high school diploma while they're with us, that is the best gift we can give them, is have that wrapped up and even have them with a credential, which goes hand in hand with an initiative that we launched about 5 months ago as well, called Project Anchor. We have a contract for $5 million with Tallahassee Community College, And this is specifically for our residential system and for kids that are transitioning out of our residential programs back into their local community. So that if I have a young person who's sitting in a facility, let's say up in Pensacola, they may start a credential with us, and if they can finish it while they're with us, we want to get that done. But let's say that young person is going to be transitioning back to Miami-Dade. Well, TCC is not the they're not the provider. What they're doing is serving as the network organizer. So they will work with the state college or the technical college over in Pensacola, where that youth may be now, to make sure there's no cost or barrier to starting that credential. And then when they transition to Miami-Dade College, they have a navigator that works hand in hand with that youth and the family and that state college where the kid will go to, and cover not only the tuition and fees, but also make sure that kid has the support to get their enrollment and be able to complete what they started. And so TCC is working with all 28 state colleges, all the technical colleges with our local school districts, so that again, we have this network, but it gives me the ability to work with one organization who has this expertise and capacity to organize those opportunities for our kids. And that is something that, again, we've launched, and just had a meeting with them the other day, and I can tell I'm excited about where we're going. But you're going to hear a lot about that, and if anything, I would tell you, I'm going to kind of wrap up the way I started. I think, again, the best strategy we can have is ensuring the educational opportunities for our kids. That is what we can do, not only, again, from prevention, but also in our residential system. And I think what you will find is even in our legislative budget request, we're even looking at coming forward with a strategy specifically in our residential programs that helps to create a more unified strategy around our K-12 opportunities, because when you have 39 programs across 32 different school districts, all 32 districts have different ways of thinking about how that service and intervention may be supported. And some of it has to do with district capacity. Hillsborough has great resources that they provide. Some of our smaller districts may not have that same degree of resource and support. So we got to look at how do we levelize that in a way that's very unified, can provide the best evidence-based supports to make sure that our teachers are trained to accelerate learning and close gaps. And that's how we get to where we want to go. But a lot of things ahead, and I want to be respectful of time, Mr. Chair, but hopefully I didn't go too long. And I'll pause to see if there's any questions.
You were fine. You were fine. Questions for Secretary Hall? Dr. Reverend Glenn Dames.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming. First of all, I apologize for my daughter missing with the courthouse. To the accountability. Sure. My question would be, thank you. My question would be, I'm sorry, Reverend Dr. Glenn Dames, Senior Pastor of the Allen Temple AME Church here in Tampa, Florida. You used to have a volunteer chaplaincy program. What opportunities for faith do you offer your residents?
Do you mind if I clarify the question just to make sure? Are you talking about residents like in our detention center or our residential facilities?
Correct. You used to have a volunteer chaplaincy program some years ago, and I'm not sure if you still have it, but if so, if not, then what opportunities do you provide for faith for the kids that come through your system?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, and I don't want to put the major on the spot, but I would tell you every center that I've been to, they all talk about how they have opportunities for faith partners to come in, for youth that want to participate in faith activities, whether it's residential or detention centers. And I can't speak to the local, but is that something we have in place here as well, Major?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay.
You're more than welcome to come by the detention center and we can discuss it.
Thank you.
And if that's something we can expand or we need to expand, listen, I'm very much about making sure we engage our faith partners, because again, I would tell you that even the governor has made that a priority, that we are working hand in hand with our faith partners across the state. I know that we see a lot of work in our prevention area as well, and it's something that even our state advisory group, which I should, comment on. If it's okay, Mr. Chair, if I can take 2 seconds maybe to expand on something.
You can take all the time you want.
Our state advisory group, for years we've been focused really on our compliance with our Title II funding and dollars that we draw down at the federal level. We redesigned our state advisory group here recently and actually basically completely reconstituted the entire SAG, where 16 of the 21 members are brand new. And the intentionality behind that is that, yes, while the executive committee of that board and that group is going to continue to look at our federal requirements, we've actually constituted new subcommittees within our bylaws that are completely aligned to our 4 cornerstones. So we have, for example, with world-class talent and leadership, on our state advisory group, we have the president for Polk State College, Dr. Angela Falconetti, who chairs that committee and works with our talent, leadership, and culture division so that we're building out those opportunities for professional growth and development for our team. We have another one that's focused on the academic achievement and post-secondary opportunity, and that's being chaired by Superintendent Deborah Pace out of Osceola County, and she's working hand in hand with our education team as we look at those strategies that we have to deploy. And so on and so forth. I just want to give you that background because we're very serious about this. We have the Deputy Chancellor at Department of Education who's working on evidence-based implementation with us so that we're also pulling in evidence-based practices for education and learning. And then we have a State Attorney out of Circuit 2 who's chairing the work group with our data-informed decision-making, Jack Campbell, who's working hand-in-hand with our Office of System Innovation. And so our meetings are completely structured now around supporting us with our strategic plan, while still complying with the federal requirements that we have to do for the state or for the feds. But just want to give you that context because at some point in time, we would love to talk, potentially with the board to see if there's opportunities here to see where we could maybe have some alignment in some of that work, if it's something that this board so chooses.
Ms. Canty Jones was first.
How you doing, Dr. Hall? I was very pleased to hear that you recognized the Career Source Tampa Bay, so I appreciate that very much. What I noticed, my background, 32 years of the school district, what I saw a lot of is the transition of youth making the decision of college. We already know that many of them are not entering into that, so I'm glad that you recognize the workforce. So my question to you, sir, is you talked about uniform strategies. Is there a strategy around the workforce? And if not, we definitely want to have your card so we have some great ideas with our Dr. Clayton that you'll hear more about. But yes, do you have anything that's uniform around the workforce?
Mr. Chair, if you're okay, I'll respond. I would say absolutely. Again, being very involved in workforce, and again, that was an area under my area, my division at the Department of Education, and we're going to be doing a lot of work around rapid credentialing for our young people. It's something that we launched with the state colleges while I was at the department, but it's got to be a credential of value, and I mean this respectfully. This is not meant to sound like a jab at anything or anyone, but there's a very big difference between getting a youth a credential that puts them into fast food. Nothing against fast food. My son's worked at fast food, but sometimes we give credentials to kids in our programs that my son got on his first day on the job that didn't make it more competitive for an individual coming in to get that job. What I'm getting at is we got to make sure that if we're giving our kids credential opportunities to go into the workforce, it needs to be something that puts them on par with, again, a great opportunity. It's got to lead to middle to upper wage career opportunities long term. Doesn't mean that's where they're going to start, but we got to make sure that, again, it's a valued credential to business and industry, and that is part of the work that we're doing with TCC so that they, in turn, can also help us leverage the network with CareerSource.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank, CareerSource, just to give you a shout out locally as well. I think the career sources around the state have been great partners. We've been working to actually address a lot of our vacancies that we had last year. So great partnership there, and appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the shout out.
Ms. Court Administrator Justice.
Good morning. It's nice to be present with you today. I have a question that's posed by one of our problem-solving court judges, and I must give a recognition to the fact that we have a very robust problem-solving court docket in the 13th Judicial Circuit to include Chief Judge Ron Ficarota, who would have loved to have been here today, except for a calendar conflict, manages Florida's first juvenile mental health court, and initiated it. But Judge Elizabeth Rice, who had also wanted to be present today, is an individual who is enabled with presiding over our juvenile drug court. And we wondered if perhaps you could comment upon the import and impact, in your humble opinion, on juvenile drug courts.
Well, if I'm going to be real candid, I would say it's going to be an area that I probably need to spend more time learning and looking at the data behind it. So I think for me to give a comment or any kind of feedback would probably be a little, it'd be probably too, it wouldn't be necessarily appropriate yet, because I would be speaking without knowing what the data and trends say. But I think if the data is showing that something is working and it's effective, then what you'll find is that I'm probably going to be very supportive of making sure that we, understand and expand opportunities that are, again, driving outcomes. That's what it goes back to, right? So if you're seeing good outcomes from it, then let's talk about it and see what that, results in, okay?
I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions for Secretary Hall? Mr. Oh, okay, go ahead, Lyra.
I was more concerned about, my question is, what change do you want to see in the classroom? I listened, and you were speaking about how getting them into college and the next step, but firstly, in the classroom, there's not a lot of support in classrooms, which I've seen myself from my own experiences, for others from teachers or peers. I've been lucky at Pace because I see how I rely on my teachers every day, whether it's for a personal matter or a school-related issue. You don't have that support in regular school, and feel like that's something that needs to be covered before we go on to the next step, to help them get to the next step, because, well, it's like trying to going into a dance competition without having any lessons and not even knowing what dance is. It's like you need to have the safety rails to be prepared to learn and grow while you're in the classroom, so you have that place outside of the classroom. Because I view, as I said before, in PACE, I rely on my teachers so much, which is something I've never been able to do outside of PACE. And I feel like that's something that needs to be changed.
Thank you, Lyra. Secretary.
Appreciate that question. They prepped me in the elevator saying they were going to ask me tough questions. We rode up together. So, you know, that's a complicated question, but let me just tell you, there's two parts to it, right? So on one hand, let's take PACE, or let's talk about even some of our residential programs. It's about how do we get, you know, great teachers in there, train them on how to work and support, you know, smaller classroom sizes like you might have at PACE compared to maybe a traditional setting, getting that additional support with maybe case managers and counselors at your program. We want to continue to double down on that and make it more effective where we have continuity, because just like we might have, you know, breakdowns in staffing with detention officers or probation officers, sometimes in our residential facilities, the districts may struggle with getting teachers to be consistently placed in some of those sites or in those facilities. So to me, it's about the continuity there. I think on your point about, you know, maybe in more of a traditional setting, I'll tell you, you know, the Department of Education, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we did, you know, continue to see great budget increases from the governor with, you know, up to where most recent, it's $140 million to put things in place like additional social workers and counselors to give those additional supports. Again, I think, you know, good is only good when better is not expected. I think what I hear you saying is you're challenging us to go back and get better. So we'll continue to work on that. But we stay close to our partners at DOE, and I think as a state, we've got a lot of things we can be proud of. And we're going to continue to fight that fight because, again, I think educational opportunities is what it's all about. But it's a good question.
Mr. Parkinson?
Thank you. Secretary Hall, I had the privilege of attending your conference in Orlando, was that October? Very impressed with both your demeanor but your staff's demeanor. You really seem to be coalescing a good team around you to follow that mission. The other thing that really stood out to me was the focus on data. And Chair Brancato is a big believer in data. We use it on a monthly basis for problem solving. In fact, we use JJIS all the time specifically for that. Obviously, the access that we have is not real time. The data is a little delayed. But I have to say, since you've been secretary, the response times from Tallahassee for specific data requests have improved significantly. Right. We've gone from months to a week to get data so that we could engage in problem solving. We do appreciate that very, very much. The other comment is, I think in the last 10 years, you're the first secretary that's come to a Juvenile Justice Board meeting. Correct me, Mr. Chair?
That's correct.
So that sends a message as well that we appreciate. The only question I have for you, again, we engage in a lot of collaborative problem solving here for specific issues. One of the issues that we've dealt with in the recent past had to do with dual system youth, kids that were involved in both juvenile justice and the dependency system. And we've had some challenges like many communities. And I know what we're doing here at the local level with our new community-based care agency, but what's going on at the Tallahassee level to improve that communication and partnership for those dependency-involved youth that also become involved in JJ's system?
It's a great question. So first and foremost, I tell you, it starts at the top. And I would tell you that myself and Secretary Harris, there's rarely either, if not a day, there's definitely not a week that goes by that we're not in communication with each other so that we can leverage the resources that we have to ensure that we're doing just what you said, supporting those youth that have contact and engagement in both systems. Something that we've done at the department directly is we've actually established a full-time position from someone who is a former chief probation officer to work hand in hand with DCF so that they're on every single staffing that we have for those youth that are on, you know, status, you know, with dual system involvement. That's something I can't tell you, you know, that we've had, you know, in the past where it's been a full-time dedicated individual with what I think is great field experience and understands, you know, through the lens of a chief, what that means to have to work both with juvenile justice and DCF involved, you know, kids. And so we're serious about it. So we've realigned some of our own resources to make sure that we can build that capacity. We have an advocate within each circuit as well who is dedicated to working hand in hand with our DCF partners on those kids that are in both, you know, again, involved in both systems. And we have quarterly report requirements now that came out of last session statutorily. And again, our teams are working hand in hand. I mean, full disclosure, I mean, I have another meeting this afternoon with Secretary Harris where we're continuing to work on the next phase of some of our system improvements. But I think, again, it starts with open lines of communication, open dialogue, and then the resources that we need to commit to make sure that we're giving the best customer service we can to the kids that we're serving.
Other questions for Secretary Hall? All right, thank you very
appreciate
much.
you.
We very much appreciate you being here and sharing your priorities with us. We'll now move on to board priorities, and we're going to have our Executive Director of Safe and Sound Hillsborough speak to us. That's Freddy Barton. He's going to talk to us about a board priority for us, which is the Evening Reporting Center and the good work that they've done there. That reporting center is funded partially by the county and partially by the state. And so it's a priority for us to try to help keep that going. And so welcome, Mr. Barton.
Good morning to everyone, and good morning, Secretary Hall. We definitely appreciate you being here. You said a couple of things that you'll hear me repeat through this presentation. First off, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank everyone for being here and allowing me to speak. I bring greetings from our Leadership Council of Safe and Sound Hillsborough, chaired by our Public Defender, Mrs. Holt, and our Vice Chair, the Police Chief of Temple Terrace, Mr. Ken Albano. Thank you to Mrs. Justice, who's here, who also sits on our Leadership Council, and many of you who we've already partnered with and supported and gotten support in the past. I'd also like to recognize two of our staff members who are here, Mr. Thaddeus Wright, who is our new site manager over at the reporting center, and Mrs. Amicia Bagley, who's over our communication and outreach programming. I want to start with the presentation, and we have it up on the board, but before we go through the PowerPoint, I want to start with a story. As many of you saw, as I walked up here, I have lovely leg jewelry on. Several months ago, I was in a bad motorcycle accident, a hit and run. The person's rear bumper hit my front wheel on my motorcycle and sent me off, rolling off the interstate. That's all I pretty much remember. When I was coming to, there was a couple who apparently was behind me, and they saw the accident happen and told me not to get up, told me to stay on the ground. And the first thing out their mouth was, "Did you get the license plate?" And I said, "Well, no, I was flying through the air. Did you get the license plate?" And I started asking a lot of questions to this couple. What happened? Where'd they go? Who was it? Did you get the license plate? And their comment to me was, "Just stay still. Don't worry about that. Let's make sure you're okay." And I want you to remember that story as I go through this presentation. Next slide. So the reporting center, which was initially called the Evening Reporting Center, was started in late 2021, and we really got to the work in 2022, and it served as a form of supervised release initially. It was to serve as a condition of supervised release for those individuals who were beyond home detention status, but still not at the score point where they were deemed needing secure confinement in the Juvenile Detention Center. And it was created so that youth who come through our center have some form of guidance, direction, but then also some type of pathway so that they don't go further down the path of delinquency. What started as an initial form of supervised release grew into several programs. We now have still a focus on supervised release. We also work with our probation youth, and unfortunately, we had to create a new expansion program component for our youth gun offender weapons program. For those individuals who are unfortunately making the decisions to pick up firearms or have firearms in their possession, we knew that we needed to expand that. All of that is being anchored at the reporting center. The goal is to not just deliver educationally focused programming and services, but also to get into the minds and hearts of the young individuals that are coming here, to let them know that you can make choices that will lead you away from not just this center, but away from other things that may happen in your life because of the decisions that you're making. We have a creed that every youth has to understand and learn, and it's for myself, for my family, for my community. I can and I will be better. I'm going to get to some startling numbers at the end of the presentation, but when we go to the next slide, we first have to understand the who, the what, the how. I'll get to the why later. The who comes to the reporting center just for supervised release? They're male youth, ages 12 to 18. I'll speak on the young ladies later. Typically, they have anywhere from a 9 to an 18 DRE score. If they're between 9 and 10, they automatically score for the reporting center as a form of their supervised release. We also know that sometimes youth, based on their history, if it's their first offense, they may not score 9 points. They may score 7 or 8 points. And if a judge feels that they could benefit from participating in the programming at the reporting center, they will offer that as an optional condition of supervised release. Most times when we get those youth and we explain to their parents and to the youth about the reporting center, the parents automatically say, yes, I want him to attend every single day that he possibly can during that 21-day period. However, if a youth scores more than 10 points, they may score for intensive home detention or intensive home detention with EM status, electronic monitor status. Sometimes the judge may require that youth to also attend the reporting center because not only are they going to get the services of having someone check on them through intensive home detention, but they need some type of supervised structure. So they still come to our facility. Our facility is located in one of our high target areas. It's 33610. It's in our East Tampa and East Hillsborough County area. That's exactly where our center is, and that's where we know one of our big nucleus sections are. However, we serve youth all throughout Hillsborough County. We're going to talk about the benefit of doing so, as well as the challenges with doing so. We have youth all over Hillsborough County that come to our center. We provide transportation to and from the center. We provide hot meals. We provide education support. We provide mentorship. We provide access to education, education support, as well as vocational training and job skills training. The what? What are we supposed to do? For supervised release, the goals are simple in our contract with DJJ and the county. 1, make sure that youth don't reoffend within that 21-day period. And 2, make sure that we don't have any tech violations or failure to appear. We'll talk about those numbers and how well we're doing with that. A typical day starts with the youth being picked up either right after they get out of school or while they're at home during that 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. time period. They get to our center typically around 4:30, and we keep them actively engaged until about 8 o'clock, 8:30, and then we transport them home. What do they do when they get there? The first thing that we do is we have, and since we only have males in our program right now, there's an outline of a male figure, and every single day the youth have to come in and they have to write a word or a phrase that describes the positive characteristics of a male. You cannot duplicate any word or phrase that you see there. Why do we do that? 1, because we let the youth know that you need to expand your vocabulary. And 2, we're going to reinforce positive messaging. The only way they get credit for the day is that they have to use whatever word or phrase that they put up at least 3 times. So again, they're giving positive messaging to themselves and to others. From there, we go into educational support. If they're in school, we check on their grades. If they're not in school, we try to figure out how we can get them back or provide some type of educational support. We provide individual and group therapy counseling sessions through anger management, our life skills curriculum, and other components in that program. And then we provide some type of exposure, whether it's through career education, whether it's through mentorship, whether it's through taking them somewhere, and I'll talk about some of the specific places in a minute, but giving them some type of exposure to what can happen once you leave this place if you make better decisions. Next slide. We know that out of 21 days of supervised release, and it works very well, and you'll see the numbers that our programming is working well, out of a 21-day period, we typically only see that youth 13 to 14 times because we're open Monday through Friday. We have 1 Saturday out of the month that we provide community service opportunities and other exposure-based programming. But what can we really accomplish within a short span of time? We can work to make sure they don't reoffend and that they make their court appearances. But how do we continue to get in their mind? The Public Defender's Office helped create what's called the Juvenile Holistic Advocacy Program, JREP for short. It takes the youth from day 22 all the way up to 90. Now we have more time to work with these youth. The first thing that we do is if a youth needs it, we get them an attorney ad litem. We pair them up with an individual mentor that's going to follow them throughout their case and throughout their time in the juvenile justice system. We also provide parent engagement and participation. We know that most of our youth don't have active parent participation in their lives. I'll talk about that number in a little bit. And so we have as a mandatory component that at least monthly we have an engagement opportunity with the parents of our youth. They come to our center, as well as we give the parents some assignments when we go home. When I talk about the assignments, I'll give you one example. We have an individual who's a retired executive chef that comes in and he teaches the young men how to prepare a certain dish. And we're not talking about spaghetti, we're talking about something that the kids would probably never understand until they get a little older, chicken Kiev, for example. And what we do is we then provide the young men with the materials, with the supplies to take that home and cook for their family. And they have, as an assignment, they have to take pictures of them cooking, they have to take pictures of them preparing the meal, and then they have to sit down with their mom, their father, their grandmother, whoever's the guardian in there. And that's not the assignment. The assignment is then to introduce this conversation topic. And the first question is, mom, dad, grandma, whoever, tell me the last time that I made you proud. And they have that discussion. And then the youth asks, tell me the last time that I hurt you. And typically there's a lot of conversation about that, but then you have to flip the card over and now mom has to ask the youth the same question. And when we get the assignments back and when the youth and the parents come back, they tell me, I've never cried in front of my child because my child told me that I hurt them. And so we're making sure that parents know that they need to communicate with their children and not just the other way around. So we provide that as well as wraparound services. And part of that wraparound service is making sure that we get them back on track somehow, some way in school and focused on finishing that. And we'll talk about that. Next slide. Unfortunately, as I said, within the last couple of months, we've had to expand programming and address the youth as young as 11 and 12 years old who are getting arrested because they have a weapon-related offense. Over the last 2 weeks, we know that locally here, every single news station has covered multiple shootings that have occurred, not just in the city of Tampa, but all throughout Hillsborough County. We know now that youth can get their hands on a gun or firearm very quickly, very easily. They are telling each other how to do it. And they are, because they lack the coping skills and anger management skills and life skills needed to navigate this tough life that they have, they decide to pick up a gun in response to a certain situation. We launched the Youth Gun Offender Program to keep youth at our center once they're out of secure detention for at least 6 months, and we track them for another 6 months. It's all about experiential learning and exposure. What happens when this bullet leaves a chamber? It doesn't have a person's name on it, but unfortunately it will because someone may get hit and you weren't even targeting them. We take them to trauma centers. We're taking them to morgues. We're taking them to funeral homes. We're taking them and putting them in front of individuals who've lost their family members due to violence and having conversations. Something that really can get in their minds so that they can understand the consequences of making these choices. And even if they haven't fired a gun, they were caught with a firearm, understand the consequences of your choice. You can turn your life around, but you can't get a life back. And so we need to continue to work on that, and we house that program, again, at the reporting center. Three phases of that very quickly. Awareness on the traumatic consequences of a firearm injury. What happens when someone gets hit? The personal experiential awareness and the learning, as I talked about, and then getting really into their minds and hearts and addressing decision-making skills and attitudinal changes. We're also putting them in front of individuals who have served time in prison. We're talking 24 to 32 years for murder, for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and having them understand that this is not as glamorous as it seems in the movies or in the videos and on social media. Once you make this decision, you may be 15, 16 years of age right now, and you look very young and handsome and full of life. And the next time someone in your community sees you, you're 55, 60 years of age, and all that youth is gone. And so we're trying to make sure that we roll that information and keep them connected to understand the consequences of their choices. If we can advance past the next slide and go to the next slide. Thank you. So data. Let's look at the numbers from 2022 to current. So we have two categories of supervised release. We have those youth who are automatically scoring 9 and 10, who are automatically scored for the reporting center. We also have the additional supervised release, whether they're under 9 and 8, optional attendance, and then those who are ordered to the reporting center in addition to intensive home detention or EM status. We had a total of 131 youth that scored 9 and 10 on the DRE. We had 63 additional youth that were part of our supervised release. I want you to focus not just on the recidivism rate to the right. We have 18% that reoffend and 22%, which those numbers are beating other markets and beating other programs that we see. We have with our juvenile holistic advocacy program, 25%, it's actually lower than that, less than 25% of youth reoffend. Now, when we talk about reoffend, we're talking about new charges, and we're also talking about tech violations. Through our youth gun offender program, we have 6 youth that are actively participating in this, and we have less than 17% of them also getting arrested or reoffending. I want to focus, Secretary Hall, since you mentioned this, there's a column that says return to school. One of the stats that we're especially proud of is 120 youth since the beginning of 2022 to current have been able to get back into their normal school environment. The way we're able to participate and help with that is every Monday we have youth go through academic review. We have their grades pulled up, we see where they are in the educational system, we see what credits they're deficient if they are, and provide them with that mentoring and academic tutoring support to help get them back once they're allowed to go back to their school. 120 individual young men, and we know that these are mainly our black and brown men, are getting back into school. Board Member Washington, I think you would really want to know that. The other yes, sir. The other statistic that we're looking at, and Mrs. Jones said this, 28 youth over the last year have begun, were able to get employed, whether it was part-time or once they finished through high school to graduate from high school and get full-time employment. So we know that the numbers show that what we're doing is working. But let's talk about not just our successes, next slide, but what's challenging for this. So one, youth want to continue to stay engaged with the reporting center. We have youth all the time that exit and say, can I come back? Absolutely. We'll figure it out the best way that we can, which is why we created different programs. We're now having more family members to participate. We have a wide reach because we serve all throughout Hillsborough County, and we've gotten great coverage of our efforts. If anyone's watched the news, especially about the Youth Gun Offender Program, you know that we're trying to make sure that that messaging campaign is out there. We know that we have startling statistics that are showing the numbers of youth that are getting their hands on guns, but we also are showing the fact that we have things to address that. Challenges: transportation, 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 transportation. We cover 1,000 square miles in Hillsborough County, and we were making sure that we're picking up our youth as best as we can to get them to the center, but transportation remains a big issue. If we're keeping the youth engaged from 4:30 to 8:30 p.m., it's hard to get a youth who's in school down in South County over to the fairgrounds area where our reporting center is. So we're trying to figure out the best way to get youth transported to our center. We welcome any suggestions and or assistance, including funding, Secretary Hall, to help address that. We also know that we have to address sustainable funding. This was initially started 3 years ago, and the Department of Juvenile Justice said, yes, we want you to do this. We know that we need it in this circuit. We're going to provide you with some funding. We know that we're coming to the close of that 3-year contract. Hillsborough County stepped right in and said, what can we do to assist and also help you expand the programming? So we're always looking for other ways to sustain what we're doing. We know that we're at year 3, Secretary Hall, so we need to have more conversations with the department on how we can continue to keep youth positively engaged. And then the question that we've gotten over the last year is, what about the young ladies, Freddie? Right now, you're taking young men into the program. What are you going to do with the young ladies? And we have plans to either open up a reporting center for ladies or to go to co-ed model. We just wanted to iron out the kinks first and figure out what we want to look like when we grow up. So now that we've gotten some good data and we have some best practices, we know what's working, we're going to look at expanding that within the next year. Next slide. I didn't have a description on this page because I wanted to let you hear from me the why. We talked about the what, the how, the where, but the why. There are several numbers on this page. The first number we see on the left is 18. 18 reflects the number of days for reoffense for youth who are not currently in some type of supervision program while on home detention status. For youth that's getting arrested, for the youth that have come through our center and we've looked at their records and we've talked to them, we've pulled data from other sources, if they don't have someone or some program working with them within 18 days, he or she is getting arrested on either a tech violation, new charge, or otherwise. 64% of the youth that come through our reporting center have had one or more immediate family members previously incarcerated. 87% of the youth that have come through our center said they can easily get access to a firearm within their community, not just in their home. And only 31% of the young men that come through our center have a father or active male presence in their life. This makes our job hard. Mr. Wright and I and our other partners, we continually try to get males in front of these young men to show them that you have someone that cares. On the right, the why, Youth SB, and I explained this a few months back. I got a phone call. This youth completed our program, and he had a status conference, and he called me early in the morning and said, Mr. Freddy, can you help me get an Uber to court? And I asked him where was his mother, was his mother at work, was she able to get him there? He said, no, she's on her way to court. I asked him, does she have a case? He said, no, she's going for my case. She left me home. Now, apparently, this young man and his mom had some words the night before, and his mother was leaving him at home intentionally, a 15-year-old, to go to the court to talk to the judge and say, my kid's off the rails and not doing what he needs to do. I called mom and I asked her, do you really want to tell a judge that you, the person who's supposed to make sure that this young man gets to court, intentionally left your youth home? And she said, I'll deal with it however it comes. We have many youth that do not have someone to stand in the gap and say, let's focus on getting you okay right now. To address that, we've started building partnership with faith-based institutions to serve as mentors, to make sure they do nothing more than go to court with this young man and say, we are working with this young man to keep them positively engaged. Youth RJ actually graduated last year from high school. He just celebrated the 2-month, he had a new infant, and the young child, who's a male, is now 2 months old. And he left in the month, December 3rd, to go to the military. And he said, Mr. Freddy, I'm just glad that you told me, in his words, so I apologize, you told me that I need to get my ass and my stuff together. And I know the military is the only thing that's going to keep me out of trouble and give me a life that I can provide a life for my son for. Thank you. And then Youth TL called us recently. He's a 14-year-old. He was a middle schooler who, unfortunately, was one of our youth that brought a gun to school. And after he left secure confinement, came to our program, and we've been working with him, and he exited out our program, and he called, and his mother called and said, please, is there any way that you can tell the judge to order me back to the center? And we asked, well, why? And he said, because my brother's getting in trouble, other people I know is getting in trouble, and if I don't have somewhere to go, I'm going to get in trouble. I don't want that to happen. Please, can you tell the judge to order me there? And I said, I don't need that. I'll let the judge know that we're working with you, but you come. We'll make sure that you get there. The why is these are examples to address the numbers on the left. This is why we do the work. It's hard. We think everything that's working is everything is working, everything is perfectly fine, and then we hear about another shooting. We hear about youth getting in trouble, and it takes the wind out of our sails. But when we have stories like this, it tells us why we need to continue the work, and we will continue the work. Because just as I was on the side of the road trying to figure out what happened to me, and that those strangers appeared and stood in the gap and said, let's just focus on getting you okay right now. That's what we do at our reporting center. We let our youth know, I know that you had some things to happen to you in the past. Let's not worry about that. Let's make sure you're okay right now so that you can heal, your family can heal. Again, to the creed, for myself, for my family, for my community, I will be better. And so we thank all of our partners that have helped us. I cannot do this work alone. I'm glad that we have good staff. We are still looking for additional staff to help expand our programming and continue our programming. I want to thank the county for its support. I want to thank the department for its support and for making sure that we're held accountable for the things that we say that we're going to do, to making sure that we have the training necessary, the background screenings necessary, the tutelage and the mentorship. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And our young men, thank you. And eventually our young women will too as well. I'll entertain any questions, and I'd like to thank you for your time.
Go ahead. That's right.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Markesh. So I just wanted to touch on the Youth Gun Offender Program in the reporting center as a whole. So what does the program look like for a child that was actually on the right path, who was a straight-A student, who comes from a good background? And I say this because my neighbor's grandson was the child that just recently shot at the TPD officers. And he comes from a good background, college-educated parents. What does that look like?
Yeah, so a typical day in the life again. So 3 components of the Youth Gun Offender Program, understanding what happens. You made this choice. We can't reverse that choice. Let's look at what led you to make that choice in the first place. But also look at the implications, look at what happens to an individual and their family and the community if that life is lost, getting them to understand that. When we take them on to the trauma centers and take them to the morgues and take them to the funeral homes, it's not a tactic to just scare the hell out of them so they never do it again. It's understanding not just life is not about the choices, but the consequences of those choices. Understand that if you pick up a firearm and cause damage or cause a loss of life, it's not just that life that's taken, it's yours as well. It's also your parents' life. It's also your community's life. And so they have to write daily about their experiences. And having to sit in front of someone who's lost their child, and for that parent to ask, why did you want to take my child's life away? And to hear that you said, I didn't shoot your child. Yeah, but you could have because you had a firearm. And let me tell you how it feels as a parent to know that I have this emptiness that can never be replaced, can never be filled. Hopefully, we will see over the long haul. Now, we just recently launched that program, so we don't have data as far as recidivism post those 6 months. But hopefully, we will get through to these young individuals to understand that you're okay because you made that one offense and you can move past your life. But let's talk about the things that caused you to make that decision so that you never do it again. And that's what we do, not just with the Youth Gun Offender Program, but all of ours. But we know that we have to focus right now on this issue with gun violence, getting these youth to understand there's another way.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Thomas. Any other questions for Mr. Barton? School Board Member Washington.
Thank you, Freddie. Thank you because you did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay. I try to use my coaching voice, but I can't now. I'm getting a little old now. But Freddie, first of all, I want to thank you because that was a great job you did. I think what I want to do, and I give you my card so we can have a workshop with the school board because I think the school board needs to really know the good things you are doing in the juvenile justice.
Absolutely.
So we're going to make that happen, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Barton? Reverend Dames.
Freddie, excellent job. Glad to see you doing better.
Thank you.
Continue to lift you in prayer.
I'm still going to buy another motorcycle.
Yeah, I know you. You from Jacksonville. I wouldn't say none of that. Duval. For those who don't know, Freddie and I grew up together. So. But Freddie, I guess my question to you is how soon are you looking to start your girls component?
You know, we would like to see, and
data,
it's going to depend on the support that we get, right? So we're looking at, we'd have to bring on new staff. We have a location that we already operate. We have 2 park facilities that we operate programming. So we have that, but we need to identify ways to support it and grow. Once you start taking on just a gender-based programming, girls and boys, you're talking about 2 different sets of programming. So before we can do that, we need to have conversations with how can we sustain it. We don't just want to start it and not be able to finish at least for another 2 to 3 years.
So funding is the key.
Absolutely. And transportation.
And y'all had many grants at one time, right?
Yes.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Barton? Yes, Ms. Rowell.
Hey, Freddie.
Hey.
We've talked many times, Latrice Rowell with One More Child. And one of the challenges that we're facing, and you guys, we have a ERC program in Clearwater and St. Pete. So we're facing the same funding challenges and trying to make that transition to prevention. But one of the challenges that we've had all year with those EM kids, the ones who are on electronic monitors, they're finding them in the Clearwater, out at the beach somewhere where they cut them off. I guess they go on YouTube and figure out how to do that. But with 21 calendar days, it is really, really hard to make an impact, and maybe you can talk about that when we have youth who are being violated because their EM didn't get charged. They didn't leave it on there for the full 2 hours. So I don't know if you had that problem, but we're currently facing that a lot, where when we're trying to put them through our 21-day intervention program in the ERC program in Pinellas, something happens and they don't get those electronic monitors charged appropriately, and then they're put right back into the system again. So that may just be us having that problem in Pinellas?
No. It's everywhere. So very labor intensive. When we do an intake and we find out that a youth is on EM status, we have an intake appointment with the youth and mom or youth and guardian at our center, and then we go to the home. And something as simple as show me where the charger is for your device. Literally. Okay, let's make sure this outlet, every day that you come in, I need to make sure that this device is plugged into that outlet.
Absolutely.
They can't get on the van unless we know that the unit is charged. We've had youth come through and we hear the messages that says, charge your device. What we just recently met with the sheriff's office about getting some programming put together with them, but also trying to figure out, can we get a device, or maybe through the jack, get a charger at our center? So when you come there for the first 30 minutes while we're going through educational support, yeah, just sit beside this outlet, let's charge this. We don't want that issue. To address the issue of youth cutting the bands off, going into and sticking the paper clips through and all of those things, the first thing that we tell them is, you are on intensive home detention with EM status in the reporting center. Let's begin with the first part. You're in intensive home detention with EM, which means somebody's looking at you on a computer screen and just waiting for you to screw up, just waiting for you to do something. Let me ask you a question. What do you want to do within the next 30 days? What do you want to do in the next 30 days? Do you want to be able to go to the beach? Do you want to go to work? Do you want to get back in school? Do you want? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, leave that thing alone. Because what you don't understand is we've got all 3 juvenile judges' personal cell phones, and we can call them very quickly, and we will do so if we need to. So let's start off with some good behavior. Does it always work? No. Is it perfect? No. But it's a lot of labor that has to be done on the front end to let them understand, again, it's not about the choice of taking that thing off. It's about the consequence. What happens to you? What happens to your mother if you have to get picked up again because you just didn't do what you were supposed to do? So it's a work in progress.
Yes. Real quick, we do take girls at our program, so we have an evidence-based intervention that we're using if you want to see what it is, because it's gender specific. And then the last thing that I want to say is I'm starting to get a lot of referrals out of Ocala area. For some reason, Ocala has gotten my name and number. And they have been for sex offenders, youth who are, and we just don't have the capacity to work with youth who are sex offenders.
We're the same way right now.
Okay.
We haven't come near that subject. We don't have a real strong curriculum. We just fairly recently started, so we want to iron out the kinks before we add yet another layer.
Gotcha.
So we just haven't started that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Canty Jones?
Freddie, I've heard a lot of conversation around. Sorry about that. I got to get used to this. Okay, Freddie, I heard a lot of conversation around school to prison pipeline. And I'm just surprised that why isn't it mentioned? And is it part of your program to reduce that?
So in part of our programming, we have videos that address the school to prison pipeline that we make our youth listen to and watch, and they have to then give comments about it. And we let them know there are 2 great equalizers of life, education and employment. Well, understand that if you do not do the things that you need to get back in school, you're going to have a much harder life. Let's talk about how to improve the quality of your life, getting back to school so that you don't go further down the system. Again, I can't do, and you can't do, mom can't do anything about what you did yesterday. What we can do now is talk about today. So understand we've got to break this school to prison pipeline. We've got to get you not just back in school, but when you're not in school, positively engaged. Again, we look at those return to school numbers and we take that aggressively seriously. We need these kids to stay in school. What we haven't been able to do is look at how do we embed a curriculum or a component in the school system. We know that's a challenge. We know that it's already a tight schedule as it is, but we want to start going into the schools to talk about consequences of choices, to talk about the consequences of firearm injury and things like that, so that we can try to get through to these kids. We know that's a long battle. Board members at Washington, we know that the school district, they have their curriculums and their, max capacity right now, but we've got to figure out a way to get in the schools. Part of that also is reaching through male teachers to get involved with the youth at our center. Understanding that we got to have men that look like them that work in the same area or live in the same area as them, that understand them, that want to pour into them. So I'm looking for mentor and volunteer opportunities with the school district to not only pull mentor teachers, but also bring our faith-based component into the schools as well. Long process, a lot of hard work, and a lot of meetings after meetings after meetings to plan it, but we stand at the ready to try.
Yeah, very good, because that would help with the reduction of the suspensions. So
Absolutely.
that's what it is, what's happening in the school before the crime is committed.
Yep.
So thank you.
Ms. Grimmick?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on something that Ms. Latrice mentioned. So the ankle monitor's in violation. Something that we're doing that I don't know that it works, but it is a concerted effort, is we are collecting everyone's information, every probation officer, everyone involved with that case, because charging is an issue. These are older devices, and when kids are wearing them, they may not put it on right, and ours are controlled by our staff. So who knows who plugged it in and is charging it. So when a kid is on an ankle monitor, what we're doing a lot of is if something happens, and all sorts of things happen, we're communicating immediately. A child shouldn't be punished for a device that failed, and that communication is critical, because at the end of the day, when they go back before that judge or the probation officer shows up, we can say we've communicated the moment we were aware, and these are the people we communicated with. It's not perfect, but it definitely should not cause another incident for a child, because these are, technology, and we all know how that's been the last few years.
And I know the department is maxed out, right? So we've asked, hey, can we get an EM system and put it at our center so that way we have it available? And our response was, we're trying to collect them back from kids right now, so we don't even have any. If there's an opportunity to get one or two charging stations for those EM monitors, if we can get them, literally, when you walk in, go plug in. It's fully charged. I don't care. Plug it in anyway for at least 15 minutes, because we don't want someone penalized because they're young individuals who don't necessarily do what they're supposed to at home. But if they're at our center, at least they're complying, and let's go ahead and help them with that issue. We can't do too much about those who want to try to take them off, except let them know that there's a consequence to that action. But certainly, if we could get some units available, that'd be great.
We got time for maybe one or two more questions, but we're going to go with Chief Hammersley.
Yes, Freddie. As far as charging, this is the first I've heard of it, needing equipment, please consult with me.
Okay.
We can make sure that happens.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Hall.
I want to make sure I'm respectful of the board member.
Oh, you're going to have to push the microphone. There you go.
I would just say, too, something that we've done to ramp up our statewide initiative around electronic monitoring is we've launched a 24/7 EM center actually in Tallahassee. So the circuits and the counties that are using our system, some counties do, some counties don't. Like Pinellas, I believe the sheriff's office is using their own system with kids on EM. Most of our other circuits are using ours, and it's a centralized system, but we have staff 24/7. And so when a youth is, potentially, in an area or an exclusion zone, what they're doing first is contacting the parent to get the kid back in compliance so that we're not seeing violations. Now, what will happen is if we see a youth who's out there in an exclusion zone they shouldn't be in, and they've got a cut strap, then we've got a process in place for that call center to be able to reach out to law enforcement so we can try to get that youth back into compliance. Or in some cases, if they have cut the strap, it could result in the violations that you talked about. But that is something new we've launched in the last few months, and we've been working with the sheriffs around the state as well as police chiefs to make sure we're implementing it and have points of contact to make sure it's effective. But it is about how do we get kids back in compliance. We're not here to try to violate everybody, but from a public safety standpoint, I'm a little bit more of the old balanced approach. If a kid is violating that and getting into a zone where a victim or something else could be happening to either them or that victim, then we got to make sure we act and respond appropriately.
Okay. Mr. Washington?
I got the answer for you.
Okay.
We just received a grant where we have the 5,000 role models, and I'm gonna give you the name of the person before you leave.
Okay.
And you can get back into the schools.
Absolutely.
Sounds good?
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who has not asked a question yet that has a question for Mr. Barton? Okay, Ms. Thomas, I'll let you go one more time here. I know you have a question. And we'll be done.
Okay, I almost forgot my question. But I just wanted to brand off what Ms. Canty Jones said about the prison pipeline. So is there still a program where the students are able to go in the jails and prisons? I know you said you show them videos, but is there still that program where they can actually, see what it's like?
So that's going to be part of our youth gun offender program. We haven't gotten the clearance to take the youth into the jails. What we've done in previous programs is part of our youth mock trials program is we've shown them the courthouse, we've shown them the holding cells at the courthouse. So we're going to build that component, but we would love to be able to take the young individuals there. There's a lot of things we need to consider before we go down that path, so we want to make sure that we get things right, you know, the small things we need to do on the front end. But certainly anything that provides exposure and awareness and hopefully turns something in these young folks' heads, we're willing to do. So it's just we have to be careful before we start going down that path.
Thank you, Mr. Barton, very much for everything you do. And I also want to acknowledge that you were here in November to receive the Julianne Holt Public Service Excellent Award. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a shout out, I can't do it alone. I appreciate my staff. I appreciate the mentors, volunteers, and our leadership council. So thank you so much. And as always, we stand at the ready. Thank you.
All right, we'll next move on to presentations. These presentations will be 10 minutes or less. And our first presenter is Ms. Chrissy Dorion. She's our transition coordinator from Hillsborough County Public Schools. She's going to talk about the Office of Student Engagement and the Juvenile Reentry Education Program, which is short for JREP.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Brancato and members of the board. I don't know how I got lucky enough to follow Secretary Hall and Freddy, but I'm going to try. It's not going to be as well-spoken, probably. I'm Chrissy Dorion, Juvenile Justice Transition Department, which falls under the Office of Student Engagement, and I work for Hillsborough County Public Schools. That sounds really big, doesn't it? Sounds huge. There's two of us. There's myself and my coworker, Melissa Russo. She's more of the court liaison, and I'm more of the school placement specialist. I'm gonna start off with just a little bit of history, okay? Hillsborough County Public Schools is the third largest in Florida, the third largest district. We're the 8th largest in the US. We have about 207,000 students. We have 12 juvenile facilities, which include 8 residential, 1 detention, 1 adult, and 2-day treatment. Hillsborough County Public Schools has always been extremely supportive of our DJJ-involved youth, hence the Juvenile Justice Transition Department. So I want to thank Mr. Washington and the school board and Superintendent Addison Davis for being so supportive always. In 2003, DJJ sent out a letter to all the superintendents saying, it's time for you to pick a transition contact. Everybody's like, well, what is that? Students that were getting out of DJJ commitment programs and detention and everything else were having a very tough time getting in school. We had a transition school that whenever you got out of a commitment program or a residential placement, you just went to transition school. Well, that was kind of like double jeopardy. You were going from one alternative ed school placement in those facilities to yet another alternative ed placement. There was only one off of Hillsborough Avenue, and no matter where you lived in the county, you had to go there. And I know because I was a teacher there. And we had a lot of kids enrolled, only some showed up because it was hard to get there. We were the first district in the state to jump on board with that memo that DJJ sent out and say, you know what, we're gonna make transition a process and not a place. And it is the smartest thing that ever happened to get kids in the most traditional school placement possible while all these services were wrapped around them. It made the most sense. It was wonderful. So our transition school closed down. This is when open record sharing started happening with DJJ, the school district, public defender's office, diversion, foster care. Everybody started talking. It was wonderful and sharing information. In 2015, July, we started sitting in specialty courts, which is genius. It really, really works. In 15, it was girls' court. 2017, it was boys' court. 2018, it was ITP court, incompetent to proceed. And in 2019, mental health and options court. We are in there to help with educational updates and say the status of the students and their progress, but we're also there to get the kids in school who are not in school, and it works extremely well. In August of 2020, Juvenile Justice Transition Department, we started falling under the Office of Student Engagement, which is a first time for Office of Student Engagement in our district. It provides individualized, consistent, equitable consequences for behavior. It's one centralized office where all of those things are happening, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And Melissa and I make up that DJJ portion of that department. In August of 21, we built a new stats system, okay? Our stats system is a student arrest tracking system. That system alerts schools, it's a state statute to alert schools of arrests. This has been amazingly helpful because what it helps us do is notify the principals and assistant principals of students who have been arrested. That way, we can put in the supports that are needed, whether it be mental health services, a school counselor, a social worker. We're gonna wrap our arms around that student and welcome them back when they get back from detention and see what they need. Check in with them. Are you doing okay? What's going on with you? September of 21, I became the chair for the Code 81 meetings. A Code 81 is a serious off-campus felony. And that statute says that we're going to hold a school hearing for any student who has been arrested for a serious violent felony. Now, what really works, because I lead the team in these cases, and I know the families, I know the students, I know what we've tried, I know the probation officer, I know all of those things, so I lead the team towards the best placement educationally for that student to move them towards a diploma. Sometimes it's an EPIC center, sometimes it's adult ed, sometimes it's AMI, sometimes it's virtual, sometimes it's back to school on a safety plan. It's very individualized with what's going on with that student, and it's working extremely well. And I'm proud to say that I just got this number yesterday, that since 2003, when this department opened, thanks to DJJ saying, hey, we need help with these kids getting back into school, we need one person to go to, one department to go to, we have served 13,650 students. 13,650 students without duplication since 2003. And that's sitting in court with them, that's placing them in school, that's after a commitment program, putting in their credits, writing their IEPs, that's working with diversion, working with bays. Whatever they needed, we do. Is it bus passes? Is it the GED voucher program? Do they need a GED test scheduled? Whatever it may be. I made so many scribbles on this when Secretary Hall and Freddie were talking. This is incredible. Now I'm going to talk about the GED voucher program, okay? That's my name for it. I'm going to say it, I guess I'll say it the formal way, okay? The Juvenile Reentry program, which is called JREP, is funded by the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners, utilizing federal justice assistant grant dollars, those are called JAG dollars, at the recommendation of the Circuit 13 Public Safety Coordinating Council. That's the formal thing. It's the GED voucher program. And it's for kids who would have dropped out of school and not been in school. And I want to give you a little bit of history that really gave me a nervous rash back in the day. In spring of 2011, the state legislature passed and Governor Scott signed legislation requiring students in post-secondary adult general education programs to pay tuition before receiving educational services. The tuition amount was set at $90 per school year, and districts were allowed to divide this amount into 2 payments of $45 each. Students who were foster care involved and homeless, those fees were waived. Well, that year, I saw a lot of students who either dropped out of school or for one reason or another needed to go to adult ed, and they were not in school because they couldn't pay. And there were programs in the community where students could apply for the funding, but there were a lot of hoops to jump through. And so I found myself, very emotionally speaking, in front of a lot of different places, and it was the JAG funds that came through with no red tape, 0 red tape. Students call our office, we send over a voucher, and we even have bus passes, we pay for caps and gowns. And I just want to thank, a big thank you to Commissioner Cameron Cepeda, and she happens to be sitting right next to me, and the Board of County Commissioners for your ongoing support with this program since 12-13. It has helped over 2,000 students who would have never made educational progress using the traditional route. I also want a huge thank you to Success for Kids, because in 12-13 they said, you know what, we'll be your local fiscal agent with no fees involved. So every dollar goes towards the kids. I said, you're gonna do all that work for no money? They said, yes, it's the right thing to do. So thank you, Pam. I wanna give you just some stats. From 12-13 to 19-20, so 8 years, okay, that the program has been around. We've spent $216,000. That's roughly 113 per student, 110, 113 per student. We've served 1,914 students. 1,175 mastered the goals of the program. They wanted to be in school. They did it. We gave them bus passes. We did it all. That's 61% success rate and 329 diplomas for kids that wouldn't have had a diploma or even been in school. This thing works. And so I just want to, and Rob, thanks for always keeping me in line with this program, because sometimes I don't know how to give you guys the proper thank you for everything that you've done for our students. So thank you. In closing, okay, yeah, in closing, I can talk for hours, okay? But in closing, I've been in Hillsborough County Public Schools for 30 years now. Shake and I, back in the day, many, many years ago, we were wondering how to get these kids back in school. So we have some historians in the group. All of my 30 years have been dedicated to at-risk kids. Every person in this room has always made education an important part of every decision. From civil citations to cross-system youth, I'm housed in a foster care building because of this group. Because we know 38% of our DJJ-involved students are foster care involved. And so being in a foster care building and being able to share that information and not duplicate services and everybody be on the same page has been amazing. But anyway, from civil citations and you all sending me to a think tank, I didn't even know what was going on there, cross-system youth, to sequential intercept mapping, that was so helpful. I can keep going on and on. I want to thank this Circuit 13 family that truly works toward the good of every Hillsborough County student. We are a family. There's not one person that you don't pick up the phone and like, what's going on? You know, it's not this formal, you feel like you have to watch every single, everybody is looking towards graduation and diplomas for these students. And like Rob said, Secretary Hall, thank you so much for coming here and making us important. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Ms. Dorion. And also, I want to note that whenever we need school records for mitigation for our students, we call and you all produce them at lightning speed. And also, you have a passion of yours, which is the Chrissy's Closet, to help provide suitable clothing for children. They can go in there and do a lot of shopping, essentially, and have clothes to wear. We're going to open it up to a few questions, starting with Dr. Glenn Dames.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Mr. Washington, well, Chrissy, actually, isn't this a big part of the school-to-prison pipeline piece in terms of keeping them in school and keeping them out of prison?
I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to say one thing. 100% of the students that have gone through the Office of Student Engagement have been placed back in an educational setting. So we are not expelling students, okay? And that has been a huge piece to all this. Everyone is getting an educational opportunity and being moved towards a diploma, period. And it's very individualized and it's very consistent.
How many students was that again?
How many students since this department started?
Correct.
13,600. And I'm the person who reads the criminal report affidavits every morning, looks at the daily intake log from the Juvenile Assessment Center, sees who was arrested, and inputs them into the stats system. And so that has also been very helpful in dealing with the schools and helping the kids get what they need. Because it's not just looking at a piece of paper and seeing a charge, and you know that like I do. It's not about that. It's about digging deeper and seeing what we can do to help.
And now you said that you kind of expanded by creating a student engagement office. I think you have a student engagement office now that kind of handles all that stuff under one roof.
That makes it consistent because we have one centralized department doing it instead of different areas throughout the district doing it differently. It's very consistent, and it has been a well-oiled machine so far.
All right, other questions?
I want to add to that. You know, many a time people say, well, y'all kick them out of school. We don't kick them out of school. Even when they're suspended from school, we send them to another changing environment because we want every student to have a right to education. So some people say, well, y'all just kick them out, suspend them. No, we give you a change of environment, but you still going to school to get an education. I just want to make that clear because a lot of people understand when they say kick them out, they're out of school. We don't do that. And Chris and I have been working together for a long time. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you, School Board Member Washington. One more question. Thank you so much, Ms. Dorion. Thank you. We'll now move on to Ms. Grimmig from CINS, and she's going to talk about the Domestic Violence Respite Program, which really increased our utilization of civil citations when we identified a gap that has since been remedied through this program.
Well, good morning again, everyone. And I'd like to echo so much of what you've already heard. This community is so unique in our resources and our ability to continue to work together. And so some of the things that we've been really great at is collaboration. And a few years ago during the pandemic, when our kids were in crisis and not in classrooms, we saw a significant trend and increase of domestic violence. And so we went from serving in 2018, 2019, somewhere about 20 kids to over 100 kids, and that has stayed at 100 kids with domestic violence charges. So I'm Sarah Grimmig, and I work for Hillsborough County CINS, as many of you know. We serve a lot of kids in our community. Domestic violence was not one of the ones we were prioritizing our work on, and I'll be honest about that. As that increased, it became the front and center priority. With the help of our wonderful probation team and our JREP program, we took this head on. So what does that mean? That means increased beds filled with kids who have domestic violence charges. That was a huge issue for me because something unique about our county is that we have a civil citation process that supports kids with domestic violence first offenses. So we took that and said, we're gonna start talking, so we hit the pavement running. Our team met with law enforcement across our entire county, which you have all heard is not very small, and it has lots of law enforcement colleagues in it. And that is not just meeting with people sitting at this table, that is meeting with officers that are engaging these kids, and typically they're not used to seeing kids in the back of their cars. So that took a lot of time, it took a lot of communication, and I will say that one of my greatest successes is seeing a family who has never been involved in the system choose civil citation. And I use that word choose because a family has a choice. A frustrated parent has the ability to say no, which puts the kid in the jack. And if they refuse to come to us when they get to the jack, it sends them to detention. And for a first-time offender, that sets their trajectory for what could potentially be next, another offense. So our agencies spent about 6 months working with all of our partner agencies to ensure that they understood that Hillsborough County has a civil citation program that works. It's taken about 2 years to really wrap services. So what we've seen increase is not only our residential beds filled with kids with civil citations instead of charges for domestic violence, but also our community counseling sessions filling with kids who have had charges, getting wraparound services so we can lower that recidivism rate for youth and families. So one of the great things that CINS gets to do is work with all these community partners. And while we saw trends in domestic violence increasing, we saw trends in truancy court increasing. We saw trends in parents needing supports for intensive case management. And with all of that, it takes a village. And so one of the programs I wanted to highlight while we were talking about our success with domestic violence is our intensive case management program. And while I know lots of things, my colleague Angel here is the expert on CINS and works with our court system closely. So he's gonna give you a quick rundown of how our petition process works in this county. And again, I cannot say enough about the work that he does because we are unique. Our court system works so well in Circuit 13 because of all of our collaboration. And so while we've been able to serve these youth and ensure that we increase that civil citation, we also have been able to serve our kids at this level with intensive case management so that these kids are hopefully not reoffending and that they're ending up with great case management and wraparound services. So Angel, come on up.
So I'll start. I'm Angel Colon, so I'm the chair for the case staffing committee. We got appointed in Hillsborough County by the Department of Juvenile Justice to chair our committee. We have an amazing support, and I want to take the time publicly to acknowledge one of our committee members, which she probably stepped out already, Ms. Felicia Wells. She was here, and Ms. Sandra Pigney had been standing members of our committee for a very, very long time. I have been appointed in this position since 2013, and we have, like I said, an amazing support from the community, not only from the Hillsborough County School District, from the Department of Juvenile Justice, We have Pace Center for Girls that is part of our committee as well, Tampa Housing Authority, Youth Advocacy Program, and then, of course, other committee members that come in when available. Our purpose and our goal is prevention, of course. We want to make sure that we are doing everything possible in order to assist the families, assist the children that we serve, in order for them to enter the judicial system and dependency system, of course. So just want to touch, and again, I just want to be very brief with this. Our committee, our responsibility is to ensure that we meet with the families and the children. We listen to the challenges, what are their concerns, their crises, and as a committee, we able to identify them and develop some recommendations that we're able to monitor them very closely. With those recommendations, we assure that they are being followed not only by the child, but as well with the parent. We collaborate with the school district with this, along with the social worker, and truancy court, of course, which is one of our big components in our committee. Once we monitor those recommendations, we assign a case manager. If we feel that it's necessary for this family and the child to get more intense services, that's where the intensive case management services come in place. Those services are very intense. We assign the case managers in touch constantly with the family and the child, monitor them in the school, doing school visits, and just making sure that the family and the child is following through with those recommendations. If, for whatever reason, there's no progress, we monitor this on a monthly basis. The committee meets every second Tuesday of the month while the school is in session. So if there's no progress whatsoever with the child and the family, so it's our responsibility as a committee to ensure that we're providing what is necessary. And if it's judicial necessary, has to come in place, then as a committee, we make that determination and we move forward with that judicial process in order to be supervised under the CINS law, which we work very closely with Judge Ballman here in Hillsborough County. So, so from there, we monitor these cases until the child turns 18 years old. Can they be terminated before? Absolutely, but all depends on if the family and the child is meeting those goals. So what I'll do, I'll just leave a little sheet. I don't want to take much time, so I'll leave some information on the desk, referral forms, and as well a business card in order, if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to touch bases on that. Okay?
So, and for one clarification, although our civil citations do allow for a civil citation for a child with domestic violence, that is not intimate partner violence. So boyfriend, girlfriend, no civil citation. Brother, sister, child, father, yes, there's the opportunity for a civil citation. And thank you both for working to provide that respite, that cool down period, so the child can get that and the family can get the services. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Grimmig or Ms. Colon? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and our final presentation is Dr. Byron Clayton. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief of Sector Partnership at CareerSource Tampa Bay. He has a couple slides that he's going to go over with us. Welcome, Doctor.
Okay, so how do I get the slides up on the screens here? Okay, all right. So last speaker, right? So what I'm going to do, I was asked to do a very short presentation, so I'm actually going to do one slide for my presentation, okay? And I was asked to talk about one of our programs. It's called the ACE program. It's a work-based learning program. So Secretary Hall brought up something interesting, and it's about credentials of value to middle and high wage positions, right? What we don't want to do is push people towards pushing a broom for a living. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we want them to be in livable wage, upwardly mobile careers. So our ACE program is a way to get our young people started along those career pathways. What it is, in a nutshell, and I'm just going to hit the highlights, What it is, it's a work-based learning opportunity where the participant goes to work for 3 days and does classroom training for 2 days. And they're paid while they're doing this, right? $15 an hour. So it's for people that need the money, this is a really great incentive, and it helps them truly get involved. But the biggest part about this is that they're able to explore a career from the inside. So think about that. You're learning, so you're understanding what it takes to learn. For instance, if you look at digital marketing, if you're interested in digital marketing, you get to learn about digital marketing and get to understand what it takes to learn, but you're also in the environment, you're on the job, you're working with a company and doing digital marketing tasks. So there's no better way for you to understand if this is a pathway for you. And if you look on the slide, these are, we do provide credentials. It's a short-term program, 8 to 12 weeks. There are credentials. These are credentials of value. And you're working in a real environment. Look at what we have here: cybersecurity, software development, phlebotomy. What you're looking at are some of the higher wage career pathways in manufacturing, healthcare, IT, business. These are the areas that struggle to hire youth, right? The data tells us that. We know that's true. This is a way to get them there. But most importantly, what this does is it gives the employers a chance to get to know young people. And the way we do that is that we are, being CareerSource, we are the employer of record. So this is free to employers. It is, I like to refer to it as a try before you buy program, because it gets the students in there. They get to, and I don't care what kind of interviewer you are. If you're only spending 2 hours trying to interview somebody, you're only going to learn so much about them. But you put somebody on site for 8 to 12 weeks, you're going to know everything you need to know about that person. You're going to know if they show up. You're going to know if they communicate well. You're going to know, if they have the ability and willingness to learn. In short, you're going to know if you want to hire that person. So everybody wins. The employer wins. The participant wins. We as a community who are trying to help kids find options, not just tell them about options, but put them in a position to actually succeed, we win as well. Those are the highlights. I'll entertain any questions if anybody has any questions about this program. And by the way, we do have Ms. Canty Jones on the board here, so feel free to follow up with her. One more thing before we ask the question, one more thing I'll leave you with. This is only one pathway. There are so many pathways out there right now, it's mind-boggling. The issue is we have to make youth aware of what these pathways are. We are putting together a career pathways workshop, which gives young people information about pros and cons of all these different pathways to different careers, where we are focusing, we're going to pilot this with the school district and also with Bays. So we've got the DJJ population in mind because we think this would be a great fit for them to understand what their options really are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clayton. Secretary Hall?
I appreciate that presentation. Quick question. So the credential itself, it's awarded at the end of that 8 to 12 weeks?
Yes.
And who issues the credential? Is it CareerSource? Is it the industry partner, or is it like the state college or the tech college?
It's a training partner, so we have different training partners depending on the program. And that's the real cool part about this program, because you also, the participant gets to engage with different partners in the community. So it's not just us. These are people that specialize in training young people.
One follow-up? Yes. Just as a follow-up, so what's the targeted age group for this particular program? I mean, is it something that's open to anyone, or is it very, defined to like younger populations?
18 to 29.
Okay, you probably said that and I missed it.
Yep.
Thank you.
That was on the other slide I decided not to show.
Got it.
Mr. Parkinson?
Thank you. We appreciate the presentation. The CAB had asked for you to come forth and do this presentation because the program, ACE, is relatively new, funded by the Board of County Commissioners. I believe it was last year or possibly the year before. So it's kind of just getting off the ground. You're starting to establish some of these credentialing processes. Has a lot of potential. You know, we talked about pathways through Chrissy's office and having kids who are getting those GEDs and diplomas, having someplace for them to go, meaningful employment, way to make a living in the community is vitally important. What you're doing is starting to bear fruit, and now there's discussions afoot about how we might be able to use this model for the adult justice system and that target population. So very, very exciting. You know, when we talked about this program a few months ago, we realized that not every CAB member was aware of its development, so we thought it was imperative that we bring it to the CAB, make sure that everyone's there, and get those referrals flowing to you.
Yeah. School board member Washington talked about putting our young people in a different environment. This is what we're doing. It's all about exposure, right? So what we're doing is we're putting them not only in a classroom environment, but we're putting them on the job in a different environment, because that's what can really make the difference for a kid. That's when the light comes on, when they can actually see, you mean this is an option that I can really go down? I can really talk to people who do this for a living? And what we've found is that in a lot of cases, when they form these relationships with coworkers and other people going through this, they find out that people are just like them, right? A lot of people that are working in this field who they wouldn't think have anything in common, they actually do have quite a lot in common. So it's again, exposure is really, really important.
Other questions for Dr. Clayton? Dr. Clayton, we thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. I checked the sign-in sheet for public comment. There was no one signed up. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to announcements. Any announcements today?
Not really an announcement. I just want to thank Lyria and Tina for coming again. It's been very good having you.
Absolutely. Other announcements? Okay, this has been a long meeting and a very robust meeting where we learned a lot. Thank you very much, Secretary Hall, for joining us, and we will adjourn the meeting.